Happy Friday, everyone, and welcome to our first ever live edition of Cocktails and Conversation. I'm your co-host, Heather Holdridge.
And I'm Larry Huynh. You said it so weird. I felt like I had to do what you
live, so I gotta work on my live voice. So listen, we have so much to talk about this week, and I feel like every week I'm sort of saying, well, this week was a doozy. Next week has to be better, but no.
So, I mean,
we was insane.
Just repeat the same thing every week.
We're going to repeat the same thing every week. So here is, for those of you who may have not seen this show before, when we used to kind of record them and then edit them together, but we're just going to be messy and live today. And so what we do is we start off with a cocktail because it's been a week, which, as we've just said, is pretty much every week. And so we're going to put together a cocktail. Larry and I are going to put together the same cocktail. You can join us from home doing that. This week's is a Gold Rush. And we'll talk a little bit about that. If you are not imbibing alcohol, the best mocktail version I've seen and found, and Larry, I don't know if you have an alternate, the obvious thing to do, of course, is to just sub out the alcohol for a non-alcoholic version of the spirit. And those are really commonplace now and great. But is ginger beer. So the three main ingredients here are bourbon. I am using Woodford's today. What are you using? A very, very small, tiny bottle of something.
Courtesy of United Buffalo Trace. Look, it's good.
It's excellent. So using Woodford's Reserve, and the other two ingredients are honey or honey syrup. It's almost like simple syrup, but instead of using regular granulated sugar, you use honey for the sweet element, and then lemon. So the thing about this is I use about 2 ounces of bourbon, and then 3/4 each an ounce of the honey syrup and the lemon juice. Now,
I made my honey syrup today in preparation.
Did you?
Yes.
That's fantastic.
I put it back into the honey container. See?
Look at you.
Someone's going to think it's honey and use it later and get pissed at me, but that's okay.
I think it's going to be fine. I think it'll be absolutely fine. I will say that I have seen recipes for this drink that have 2 to 1 to 1, but I personally like less sweet.
We are on the same page, Heather. Same page. And shake it up, because if you're going to make a drink that has, mixers like lemon and all the syrup, it's a shaking thing. Over a big cube.
Satisfying.
Over a big cube.
Yeah, I got a big cube too. Wow, we're going to tap it out. All right, there we go. I made a big drink. Now, I'm also doing nice little garnish here, fresh lemon.
Have a lemon twist in mine.
Well, I'm getting fancier. I did like a little ribbon situation.
Oh no, I don't have time for that right now.
Yeah, and so cheers to you.
Cheers to everyone. So let's talk about it, because the Gold Rush is happening.
The Gold Rush. The Gold Rush is happening if you make millions or billions of dollars a year. For the rest of us, it's looking like it might be a net negative. So obviously the big news of the week is the Republicans in the House, by 1 vote, passed Trump's big tax cut bill. And I'm not going to repeat how he has branded it, because it's good marketing. But it's yes. And so yes. So I'm actually gonna read through some of this, because by
the numbers. The
top lines may be getting reported, but there's a lot of little sneaky fine print in here that is not being as widely reported. So I want to break through it. So the first and foremost is it essentially extends, and in some cases makes permanent, Trump's tax cuts from when he was president the first time in 2017. It increases this thing called the SALT deduction, which was really important to members from high tax blue states. So it increases the SALT deduction to $40,000. So for those, but I'm from New York originally. So, you know, things like our property taxes, they are higher in states like New York. And so this allows for a greater deduction if you're filing your taxes solely. And here's benefits to everyone, but there's an asterisk and there's a fine print here. So I want to make sure we talk about this. The child tax credit, which is currently $2,000, that's going up to $2,500. And there is also Trump, and he campaigned on this, no tax on tips and no tax on overtime. Here's the kicker. The tax cuts for rich people are permanent here and forevermore, right? So they never will have to change that again or vote on it again.
Right.
But the child tax credit, no tax on tips, no tax on overtime. Guess what? Temporary. Gee, when do they expire?
When he's gone.
2028. Right.
Exactly.
And so at the end of 2028, which is chef's kiss. Now, why did he do that?
He's going to leave, like he's going to take a dump in the White House and leave. Basically what's happening.
Well, that is analysis right there. So those are kind of the benefits overall. And there are other smaller things here and there, but here's the deal. When you are going to reduce revenue by that much, you have to talk about where are you going to either reduce your spending so that the deficits aren't exploding. Now, as it is,
they're already increasing. Right?
Correct. You're going to increase the deficit by, I don't know what the exact figure is now because the nature of the bill was being written literally as they were voting on it at 6 a.m. yesterday morning. But we are talking upwards of $4 trillion. $4 trillion
yes.
That we are now going to be adding to our overall debt. And what happens when you increase the debt by that much is our interest payments go up. And when our interest payments go up, inflation goes up, right? So this is an inflationary bill. And let's remember a year ago that this entire presidential campaign was run on the fact and was in
economics, inflation, pain for people.
Exactly.
So the goal is really, I mean, look, this is those who pay attention. This has always been the aim, right? It's always been structurally what they've gone for, which is to basically enrich the haves further and take away from those who have less and have nots. The campaign, though, was litigated in a way that just brought things generally. So, and they're doing the same thing as a bill. They're talking about everything in generalities or the total. And the total seems like it's a good idea, except for it's asymmetric who gets helped, right? Well, so like a small group of very rich people get a lot out of this. And a bunch of people who don't have much are getting screwed. What are they talking about? They're talking about hundreds of millions of Medicaid cuts, right? 8.6 million people expected to lose healthcare because of those cuts. And that's what's happening to those people, while a very small percentage are going to average upwards to $50,000 in tax savings, of which they don't need.
Right? Oh, absolutely not. And the other thing you mentioned, Medicaid cuts, which we'll get into a little bit more in a minute here. They cut $300 billion. $300 billion from SNAP. What is SNAP? SNAP usually used to be called food stamps, right? So there are 42 million Americans who benefit from SNAP program. They are going to end up kicking off roughly 3 million people, they think, from SNAP by virtue of this. And by the way, that funding also helps our farmers, right? Who are helping produce the food that then is consumed and people buy to eat. So not only are people losing those benefits, but then when they lose those benefits, which are to be used for certain types of groceries, they're also going to be eating less healthy because the food that is cheaper is that highly processed food. So when you have RFK on one week talking about needing to eliminate ultra processed food, and then you're cutting hundreds of billions of dollars in SNAP benefits to families, which include children, by the way, right? That doesn't really, that's
well, I mean, intellectual consistency, this is not, and nor has it ever been. So I mean, guys, let's temper our expectations there. I think again, the numbers are bad, and actually, it's interesting. I spent a week. I was at a conference of which I presided over, and it's bipartisan. So yes, people, I do hang out with Republicans. In fact, I have to hang out with a lot of them. And I find interesting things, and frankly, I mean, to be fair, if we talk to each other a little bit more, I think things would be a little bit less screwed up. But this is the type of bill. I heard a lot of people who are very, very overconfident, right? They think they're going to just run through everything they're doing, everyone loves. And next year, it's not going to be the bloodbath that everyone expects and that Republicans are going to do well. And then you talk to people who are much more introspective, and they are scared as shit. This bill in particular, they know will be bad. They know will affect them negatively next year in the elections. And the powers that be, and especially Trump, doesn't care, because guess what? He doesn't have to run for another race ever. But
he also doesn't care about anyone but himself.
Right, exactly. He doesn't care about.
So he doesn't care about Republicans who he makes walk the plank.
Not at all.
On his legislation, because he's just going to say, look, I got it done. And the impact of that downstream is irrelevant to him. Right. But I do want to lift up a couple of other pieces to this. One of and SNAP is a good jumping off point for it. There are parts of this where they have pushed off more costs onto the states. Well, here's the challenge with that. The challenge is that 49 out of 50 states constitutionally, based on their state constitutions, they have to balance their own budgets every year. So you have Trump pushing off more and more costs onto the states, whether it's SNAP benefits, whether it's some of the Medicaid pieces of this, and they can't afford it. So that is going to put more squeeze on them. And there's no way that they're going to be able to make up those gaps for their own citizens who, to be clear, when you talk about some of these Medicaid cuts, it is going, and the SNAP cuts, it is going to disproportionately hurt people in rural communities who overwhelmingly voted for Trump.
Overwhelmingly, and not just voted, by the way, because a study that I was working on just came out. They turned out in higher numbers. People who don't normally vote in rural areas came out because Trump is, or at least was, their guy. And he is, these things are, these changes are really going to screw over those people. It will be interesting to see their reaction. But ultimately, I think we've talked about this before. There are going to be very strange bedfellows at some point when it comes to politics, of people who are disproportionately hurt by what this president is doing. And they are a lot of his voters. And a lot of the voters who are sort of, quote, working class, people who came out, lower income, lower education, the supposed non-elites that he was fighting for are railing against the elites. Well, like you and me on this, he would consider elites.
How dare you?
I think so. Where do those people come out at this? Do they vote? Do they stay home? Do they vote against Republicans? Who knows? But it ain't for them.
No,
so they ain't gonna be happy.
It certainly isn't. And let me point out a couple of the other pieces on this. The next thing's a little bit of a quirk. I call it the hitman tax, which they're eliminating. So you're welcome for all hitmen out there. This eliminates this tax that has existed forever. It's $200, and it's a $200 tax on gun silencers. Okay. Crazy. All right. So obviously that's not a money thing. No. That is just a sop to the gun lobby.
Yeah, it's a handout to the NRA.
But who uses gun silencers? That's the.
There's a time and place, Heather.
Listen, I saw Gross Point Blank 20 years ago. So
you never know when it's needed. So it's for everyone.
You don't know when you need it.
Yeah,
will we need it when the zombie apocalypse comes? Do you need
probably do, because you don't want to wake up the other zombies, right? So that's what happened on Last of Us. If you they don't shoot their. Which is why don't they have silencers? If the tax existed, they would have silencers on Last of Us, and they wouldn't be so afraid to shoot the gun, because they're afraid to shoot one zombie, because then the other zombies wake up and run at them.
You know what?
So it's for the future.
That is.
It is for the future.
That is actually the good policy reason. So thank you for educating me on that.
I thought about it not till just now, so I think it's relevant.
So that's helpful. In less funny news, I guess. I think one of the student loan pieces here is interesting. there's been a lot of talk in other areas around student loans and the ways in which the Trump administration is clawing this back. But here's what they did that just to me is just so incredibly cruel. So if you have a student loan and you become unemployed or you have some other hardship, something happens to you, then you can apply to put a pause, right?
Give me a minute to get my shit together.
Yeah.
Can you just like not be hard on me?
Well, not anymore, because they just eliminated that, which is just a great, unfortunately, example of the cruelty of this administration. They just, and the Republican Party in this instance, they just don't really care about what people are going through or how people are struggling to make ends meet when they have these debts that they're working through. The other one, and this is personal to me, and you definitely didn't hear about it because it is buried in this ginormous bill, which is they have defunded Planned Parenthood. Now, I worked for Planned Parenthood for many years, and what they are doing is providing basic healthcare. Yes, that includes abortion services, but what the Trump administration and the Republicans have done here, because they know they could never get this passed as a standalone, and they also know it's very unpopular because Planned Parenthood is very popular because they are providing basic healthcare to almost 3 million people every single year, and they have snuck that into this giant bill, and God almighty, I'm going to make them pay for it.
Well, I mean, they would never want it as a standalone bill, right? They want it snuck in. So, and by the way, one other thing I think about the student loans that you're no longer able to have your loans forgiven if you were scammed by a higher education entity that really didn't deliver the services. So, I mean, that also checks given sort of Trump University, like they're like, well, if we screwed you. We came up with this scam university and you had student loans and didn't get what you actually paid for. You cannot get those forgiven anymore. And so then like, let's not worry about it. Let's not worry about like screwing over those folks, right? It's just sort of like, and helping people who get screwed over, but like people like Trump, right? It's always about that. Like if you are the scammer, you benefit. If you are the scammed, you're screwed. Period.
That's right. And it's interesting because even when there were sort of warning shots, if you will, that were coming from the markets, even before they passed this bill. And that is continuing, right? We're seeing the markets respond negatively to this. Why? Because of the increased deficit in the way in which this bill literally ignores. And in some cases, they're burying the deficit. They're saying, oh, it's going to get made up. It's not. You have at least $1.5 trillion that is not accounted for in what they have spent. And even when you take into account these draconian and dramatic cuts in spending to SNAP program, Medicaid, as we've discussed, and other areas, it's not going to cover the gap for billionaires and millionaires to get theirs.
Yeah, and on top of that, right, they're announcing sort of another set of tariffs or what they're going to do in the EU. So the markets just are just beside themselves. I saw this article though, in general, where all these folks are like, we thought we were talking to him, we thought we were doing some things to appease him, and he still did it. And I'm like, well, that's your stupidity. Like Tim Cook's like, we tried to like, and then now that there's a 25% on iPhones, I think. And so you look at the market, every sort of indice is down except for the volatility market. The volatility index is up 10% today because it's a shit show.
They love Trump. They'll have a poster of.
I know, and I keep telling myself to put money in there, and I keep like not doing it. But I'm like, I need to listen. Yeah, he's telling us everything.
It's true because the markets don't lie.
Yes.
So I want to move on into the man who many called our co-president for the first 3 months of the Trump presidency, Elon Musk, who after having really pissed off, honestly, every member of the Trump cabinet, and then spending tens of millions of dollars on a Wisconsin Supreme Court race that the Republican favored candidate lost by 10 points. He's sort of, taking his leave at this point, and Doge is now going to move forward and continue doing their path of destruction, but without Elon. But I thought it was interesting because earlier this week, the Trump administration, there's been a Freedom of Information request, right? To understand the how decisions were being made and how they were targeting certain programs. And the Trump administration asked the Supreme Court to quash that request, right? Well, of course, but the whole thing here is, the gap between the transparency and the accountability and what Doge was supposedly about, and now
not just Doge, right? All of I was just in an Uber. You always hear interesting things when the driver has the radio on. So the radio was on, and it was this woman with whatever, Make America Healthy Again, whatever the hell it is. And they're just like, all she kept saying is like, oh, we want everyone to make their own decision. We talked about this before. We're just making sure everything's radically transparent. We want to give you everything so that you can figure out that, your kids shouldn't get the measles vaccine or whatever the, fuck that people think. But yeah, it's just sort of like, that is what they say. And then what they do is different, especially like the fact that they're arguing that the FOIA request does not apply because they have no power. The judge's sort of initial reaction, the reason they're still trying to deal with it is they were like, no, you're actually like,
really? Because you shut down USAID in
exactly
2 hours.
Telling people is inefficient or should go away is actually going away, or they are firing people based on these recommendations from Musk's Doge. And so, yes, you have an operational aspect. So it's all the details of law. Just know that they're trying to hide how they went about doing it and the processes and all the stuff we didn't see. What we saw was bad enough. I think if you find out how they went about it, it's gonna be insane. Yeah. And they're just trying to hide that.
100%. I want to, one thing that caught my eye that, again, I feel like slipped under the radar a little bit with all of the discussion around the Republican tax cut bill is FEMA, right? So, during the 2024 campaign, you had horrible Hurricane Helene. It just, the wave of destruction and the swath of destruction
water.
It was awful, including in North Carolina, which is where I have family down there. A lot of family down there, actually, at this point. And they were really decimated. It became a campaign issue. Then candidate Trump accused the Biden administration of not caring about the victims out in Western North Carolina. But what's happening now is very interesting, right? So now you have the Trump administration saying, well, Kristi Noem literally just said this a week and a half ago, FEMA's failed. We think FEMA should go away.
Right.
So she's saying it should go away. North Carolina had a $10 billion request for funding denied. Keep in mind, Trump relentlessly just hammered that Joe Biden didn't care about you. And now he's denying funding to North Carolinians for them to dig out of this mess that they're in. So that's insane. On top of that, you have places like Georgia, Arkansas, where the administration has denied, either additional funding, additional time for them to get resources to the people who need it most after some of these horrific storms.
No, there's no need to help people. And first of all, if we're going to get rid of something because, quote unquote, it doesn't work, then I really hope like Kristi Noem's plastic surgeon is no longer in business, because that's not working.
Come on now.
I mean, and the extensions, it's crazy. Like, I just saw before and after. My sisters were texting it, and we were just like, anyway, she looked better before. For those who may not know what she used to look, she looked like a normal person. But yeah, the thing is, like, again, this is another example of there is no specific rhyme or reason. This is where Trump is weird. He's beyond weird. But one of those areas where politicians would not normally sort of screw over the states that are actually the ones that voted for them, right? You're not going to initially screw over Arkansas or screw over North. These are states that voted for Trump. Arkansas disproportionately. They got their money back by they had to beg. Yes. They had to and the governor used to work for him. Correct. So it's like there is no. So clearly Trump takes care of somebody, but you have to be in this very small or tight circle, or actually continue his gravy train. right? It is very much a how much have you done for me lately, and I'm not going to remember that. So unless you've done something of recent ilk, then he's not interested, right? So and that the FEMA stuff is an example of that, and another example of that is the MEMECoin Gala, right? It is an example of like, what are you going to do for me that helps me now? So they just had a big gala yesterday, I think.
It was last night, yeah.
Yeah, last night, where the people who put the most money into paying off Trump get this special gala, and it's just wild. It's unclear how many people were there. Some people actually turned down their invitation because they didn't want to be exposed. That's always a good sign. There's a recent Wall Street recent Wall Street Journal article about Justin's son, who is it Tron, I think it is. Some weird crypto thing where they believe like half the illegal activity in all of like crypto is done through this. And so he had been avoiding coming to the US because he'd been afraid of being arrested. Guess what? He invested, I think, $28 million into MEMECoin. He's like, I'm good now. I can come back to the United States and not be afraid of being arrested because I just gave $28 million to MEMECoin. And not only do I come back to the US, I'm going to dinner where everyone's tracking who's showing up. And he goes to the MEMECoin Gala, or was supposed to, because he's not afraid because he paid off the person in charge.
Well, and speaking of that, I mean,
Gold rush, by the way, that's also the gold rush.
Actually, that's also,
it's the theme.
That's a theme. This week, Trump hosted President Cyril Ramaphosa from South Africa, and Ramaphosa at some point, because it was one of these moments where Trump tried to attack Ramaphosa, and honestly, it was bizarre, right? The way in which it was so weird in which they tried to attack Ramaphosa, who is a Black South African, for white Afrikaner farmers being attacked and having their lands confiscated, which is not
what they say racism.
Right. And so Trump literally had printouts of articles from places like, to be clear, the Daily Mail, the New York Post, not, the top
it's real. It's real.
Right. But he also showed a video, which
crazy.
Well, it turned out that stuff wasn't even from South Africa.
So those in our audience, like, when has this happened to you before? Was it your elderly grandparent, your crazy uncle? This is the behavior. It's behavior that, frankly, is a sign of advancing age and less competence, right? So everyone wants to talk about Biden and his sort of decline, but Donald Trump is the old man yelling at the clouds. He's Grandpa Simpson just screaming at the clouds for whatever else is going on because he is unhinged. It is actually I keep returning to this, but the competence of Trump, just because it's manic, doesn't mean that it's better.
And I think that's where the obvious reality that Biden should not have run again.
Yes,
right?
And
in
this
2024
is horrifying.
Right, but he was also, and he was not out in public, and he wasn't out there communicating much, and that's a job of the president, right? The president should be visible. The president should be communicating, and Trump is out there and he's visible. But because Biden was not out there and not visible, Trump just gets all the points for being out there and being visible, and nobody's paying attention to the specifics of what he's saying.
The crazy is a problem.
It's unfair.
But I don't want to get into sort of media indictment, but I will a little bit. They want access. They want someone to be around because otherwise they have nothing to write about. Mm-hmm. So then but they're not as critical about it because he's around, even if it's crazy, but certainly it drives clicks, it drives activities. It is the attention economy, right? Mm-hmm. He is part of that. And that
he controls. I mean, he has mastered it. And I actually,
crazy works in that type of right. Crazy is perfect for attention economy. right? Crazy and manic and wild is perfect for the attention economy. So he's perfect for the times, but it doesn't make it better.
Yeah. I have one other thing before we get into lighter and happier fare. Also, I'm about 3/4 of the way through my drink. I don't know about you, Larry. So I do want to lift up, though, this weaponization of government. And, you know, Trump said famously, when he was running, I will be your retribution. But really the retribution that he is seeking and very clearly actively pursuing is about him. So just this week, a couple of really big high-profile examples. Obviously, just yesterday, the administration announced they were canceling, the ability for Harvard in this escalating battle with Harvard University for international students to come there.
27% of the students at the university are international.
Correct. And so they're clearly just trying to put more and more pressure on Harvard until they relent. In fact, Noem went on TV yesterday and said, well, you need to get your act together, which is like fall in line, right?
Yeah,
which is
a slightly different thing that I thought was interesting on that. They're now they are trying to play this PR game with Harvard because they start to highlight how many of the students are from China. Just so you know, because if it wasn't bad enough, like let's just become racist, which is great. And but you know, to the nerds' credit, they were ready. They less than 24 hours, they sued Trump with a 72-page document. So they were ready, right? The nerds were ready. They realized how they have to play this game. They were expecting this. They put it forward. A judge almost immediately granted a restraining order on it so that, well, at least the kids who are graduating in a week or two get to graduate. By the way, it's just like the timing is just so rough, and it really is sad because, like, I'm an alum, so certainly but I know this is way bigger than that. It's all about education. It's about academic freedom and whether people will come to heel. So as soon as you don't, they're trying to escalate it. We'll see what happens here, right? I'm gonna bet on the nerds, but we don't know.
But here's my question, okay? You know, famous alums like I don't know, Bill Ackman, who was very concerned about the anti-Semitism and took all his firepower at taking out then president of the University of Claudine Gay, right? Where's he now? I haven't heard from him. Okay.
A couple weeks ago, he said something like giving him a chance.
Giving him a chance? Well, so here's the thing. You know, these self-inflicted wounds, the brain drain that we're going to experience around people not wanting to come here, not wanting to study here, and not wanting to stay here for the next generation of the smartest people in the world, because we have the best universities in the world. And this administration doesn't care because they're too busy focusing on retribution.
I think people don't realize this. So people are doing some really important research that's going to drive innovation, whether it's medical innovation or innovation in other areas. They are coveted, so they can pick up and go, right? And by the way, not just international folks. You know, you may see folks who are Americans who don't want to work in that environment because they're like, I want access to the best talent. I want, like, this research is hard as hell, and I really need the best of the best, which, by the way, it's always a mantra on the other side. It's like, we should always have the best of the best and blah, 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 blah. And that's that's what they use to never sort of hire people who are more diverse, right? They're like, oh, it's always the best of the best. It's always interesting how the best of the best looks white. So, you know, it's just how it always works. But those folks can get up and go. They do have mobility. They don't have to stay here. So, you know, researchers, it's not just researchers at Harvard or Yale or University of Texas or Florida or Michigan or Cal Berkeley. They don't want to be they don't want to deal with that smoke. They're just researchers. They want to go do their thing and be left alone.
Yep, exactly.
But that's not the only one, right? So this is more specific to us, the other people they're attacking, right? He's always attacking his enemies.
Well, and let's look at a couple of the others this week. And this is where the political space comes in. You have the DOJ looking into Andrew Cuomo. They have charged Congresswoman LaMonica McIver for being outside the ICE detention facility in her district in Newark, New Jersey. Brandon Johnson, Chicago mayor. They're investigating him for hiring illegally on the basis of race.
Yes, exactly.
Right. And then Tish James, who's the Attorney General of New York State. And that's clear political payback. Right. But I just want to focus on the Cuomo thing for a second, because a lot of people in the progressive space, are not big fans of Andrew Cuomo.
Not great.
But here's the thing. Eric Adams, who's the sitting mayor of New York City, right? They famously dismissed charges. They went through a whole rigmarole for it. Eric Adams is dirty, okay?
Gross.
And so Andrew Cuomo is running for mayor of New York and is far and away the favorite to win. And so now you have the DOJ investigating him to hobble Eric Adams'
amazing.
most potent adversary.
Yeah.
It's bananas.
But you know what? It's like he would have to get rid of it is so insane, and it's so transparent, right? But it's like and what was it? They're going after him for his statements during COVID or something like that. Like, because it's so crazy. It just
crazy.
You
don't have to like Andrew Cuomo, right? It doesn't matter.
No, it doesn't matter.
It is just the naked way in which they are using, again, the powers of the state, the powers of our government, to go after political opponents in service of their friends.
Look, and I get the sentiment. There have been many times in my life that I wish I had more access to things to do terrible things to my enemies. It is a normal feeling, at least for me. But this is so outside the bounds of what is acceptable and should be acceptable by our society. It is really insane, and it's not going to stop. So if you don't think it's you now, it will be you later, because the only thing that matters is like Trump himself. So by the way, I mean, if I were his kids at some point, I'd be like, at some point, if it ever came down to it, he would like totally fuck me over. Well, especially if I were Eric or Tiffany.
How dare you single them out?
No, we all know.
Listen, he has a new grandchild.
And the only reason Don Jr. gets a pass is his name is Don.
We can't even talk about that. Okay. I want to move on to our pop culture moment, which you typically are like, you're the pop culture moment guy, because I don't pay attention to any of it and whatever. So Larry, what is your pop culture moment of the week?
No, I think in these dire times where we need people to fight for us, and really one of the few areas where things are actually somewhat working, like barely, but still working to push back on the Trump agenda, is in the legal area and in the courts, right? And just people fighting for the right things. I mean, that we just gave the Harvard example, where the little Harvard nerds and the poor associates who probably had to work like crazy to get that done were able to create a restraining order and give some people relief, and we'll see where it goes. But we are in need of more help. And what I learned this week is, do not fear, people. Kim Kardashian has gotten her law certificate. She is ready to jump into the fray at any moment. You better call Kim if you need something.
Better call Kim. Better call Saul. Yeah.
Great show.
So you're saying she's going to be defending drug dealers soon? What are you saying?
I'm just saying that Kim now has her certificate. She had to actually, it's a comment. She did not go to law school. People keep saying she graduated from law school. She did not graduate from law school. In California, I think in a couple other states, you can do an apprenticeship program where you just work and supposedly read a bunch of shit or just pay off someone. Unclear. So maybe
it's both?
Probably both. So she was an apprentice to some lawyer. I don't know, supposedly up here in the Bay Area. I'm not sure. And then she had to actually take what's called the baby bar to sort of get farther along, because they are trying to keep scams from not happening. She failed it a couple times, which I'm not holding it against her. Apparently that is typical and happens. She finally passed the baby bar. So she did do that unless she had someone else take the test. Unclear again. I'm not making any suggestions. And then she had to finish the rest of it and put in a certain number of hours. She still has to take the actual bar exam and pass that. But once she does, folks, we have another person on, maybe, who can help us. Kim Kardashian is ready and willing to work. Everyone should feel good, have a drink, enjoy the holiday weekend, because we're getting help, y'all.
Okay, well, when you get arrested, I look forward to your retaining Kim Kardashian.
Oh,
the last thing I want to lift up is the fight back of the week. And it's been a tough week with this tax cut bill that's really going to hurt a lot of people. And I actually want to make one last point about the tax cut bill. The thing about it is all it's doing is extending existing tax rates that were passed in 2017.
Right.
So people aren't going to actually
no.
feel the tax cuts because it's just extending them. But they are going to feel the spending cuts.
Yeah, and it's like one of those things where in politics, that's just like bad politics. But
it's bad politics, but shame on Democrats if they can't make a hay of it.
Well, so I was talking to someone this week. They said, he said, if you guys, the only way it's not good next year is you screw it up. I was like, give us a chance.
We want a chance to screw it up. I have one other thing that I wanted to lift up because it kind of made it. I actually don't want to say it made me happy, but I think it's a really good object lesson in the shortcomings of the Trump strategy of domination politics. So just yesterday, it was announced that Greenland and the EU had cut a deal for minerals on Greenland, right? And U.S. is totally cut out of it. Well, here's the thing. When Trump, with all of his bluster, how many times were we talking about this? He's going to take over Greenland, maybe a military, intervention, blah, blah, blah. He sends J.D. Vance. He sends Don Jr., all of these people up there. And Greenland says, screw you. I'm actually willing to work to extract our natural resources with people who are not threatening us. And so they do have a lot of resources available. And the Trump administration has been totally cut out of it because we're so disrespectful. So I don't love it in the sense that, I am team pro-America, but the Trump administration acts as if everyone just needs to bend the knee. And that's not how it works.
Yeah, being pro-America means actually having someone who's effective on behalf of the country. So, I mean, I'm just confused by it because I thought we were annexing every country in the world. And so I just really frustrated. I feel misled.
It should have been in the tax cut bill, honestly. Should have been in the tax cut bill. So obviously, everyone has a long weekend. Obviously, we want to take a moment to acknowledge what this weekend's about, which is it's Memorial Day, and it's honoring our fallen soldiers who have fought and died for this country. I get emotional generally, so but it's an important time when we're all spending time with family and friends. Larry, I hope you have an awesome weekend. My drink is empty. I hope yours is too.
I was so close to just dipping in. It's been a long
week. You're going to a straight shot at this point. Yes.
Long week.
Long week, my friend. Enjoy the long weekend. I hope everyone enjoys your long weekend, and we'll see you next week.
Y'all have a good. Bye. Be good.
Be good.